here. You're about to see Zig's terrible drapes. This is not our personal choice. This means we're live out in the field right now. These subtle undertones that I'm using right now, this slow, soft voice, the fact that I'm not screaming in your face as Mr. Henry means that there's probably someone on the other side of that wall right now that I don't want to frustrate lest he come over here because we're in hotel rooms right now. We're doing the thing. We're making it. We're in Georgia. We're knocking doors. This is a Real News Live update while we're in Georgia because we love this family so much. We love what we do with this community so much. We love who you are. That's right. You in particular watching the other side of this screen right now. My name is Mr. Henry. This program is entitled Real News. We make real friends here. Our boy Zig's here. Our boy David Shine Thompson is here. Believe it or not, David Shine Thompson is actually directly on the floor below me. So I'm here. David's down there. We're in Georgia. David and I are in North Georgia. Zig's in Atlanta area, maybe something like that. We're going to get into some great topics tonight. We're going to bring y'all updates as to what's happening in Georgia, what we're hearing on the streets, what the door knocking looks like, the race to control the Senate, a myriad of other national topics, some big updates for Tennessee, vaccine-related conversations. We have a bunch of stuff going down. Look at these bags under the eyes. You see this? It's door knocking bags. Let's go to David Shine Thompson first. He's literally right down there. How you doing, buddy? Stuff good on your end?
I'm just trying to make sure it all works right now. Just trying to make sure Real News is live and that everyone can hear everybody. And I have no idea if anyone could hear the intro. I've had some weird audio issues, but it looks like hopefully everyone can hear me. But good evening, everybody, and glad to be doing Real News on the road.
That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Zig, buddy, how's everything going on your end? What part of Georgia are you in right now?
We are in Kennesaw, Georgia, knocking more doors than you could even imagine. Hundreds of doors out here in Kennesaw for the great senator, David Perdue, doing it bigger than anybody has done before, 1,000%.
That's what I'm talking about, man. All right, let's use this topic, David Perdue, as an intro into what's going on currently, okay? We're going to be sharing some screens. We're going to be sharing some stories and everything else. But let me just, for the sake of what's going on right now, talk about the title of this program. You'll see it at the top of the show notes every single day, linked at the top of the show notes here. The show is entitled Filling Power Vacuums. If you didn't know this, by the way, too, if this is your first time into Real News, at the top of the show notes, if you click that See More section here, at the top of the description of this program, if you click See More, you'll see a little blue link. If you click on that blue link, it goes to the Evernotes that we use live during this program. Gives you all the links to the stories, gives you some highlighted stuff, maybe even a little bit of words of wisdom from Mr. Henry himself. Those are usually in red. Don't knock me on grammar, all right? I type it like I read it, like I'm going to say it. It's there for a sake of theater. That's about it. But today, what we're talking about, as y'all are seeing here, is filling power vacuums. It's the title of this program. And part of the reason I think we're here in Georgia is talking about this idea of filling power vacuums. But I want to start with sort of this opening, broad philosophical conversation that I've been having with multiple activists here. We have about 15, 16, 17 folks down here that are knocking doors with us, plus the 5, 6, or 7 actual employees that are knocking. We have a whole team over here just in North Georgia. I mean, talking just in the Ringgold, Georgia area, if you haven't heard that. Zig has a whole another state worth of individuals down there. I've been having conversations with people up here talking about this idea of, as I'm going to door, what do we do next? What comes after Trump? And I know for a lot of Republicans, that's a difficult question to try and start having. I want to jump there now tonight because most of the conversations that I'm having right now, whether it be at the doors or with people that we're knocking doors with right now, some of the activists or even some of the other employees, it's still stuck in this realm of Trump still has a chance. And I get that. He might. But one of the stories I didn't have time to prep today because it broke literally just before we came on air is apparently Attorney General Barr now is starting to come out and saying, listen, it's probably likely that President Trump's team does not have a legal path to victory. And I said space legal. He does not have a legal path to victory. Now, those were not his exact words, but the idea that I'm bringing up here is, yes, we can still maintain hope and talk about this stuff. And most importantly, more than anything, people need to trust the integrity of how that election comes out and a peaceful transition of power. But at some point, somebody in the realm and vein of conservatism or somebody in the party or somebody somewhere is going to have to start stepping up and asking this question, not just what comes after Trump. That's not what I mean. It's a little bit of what I mean. But the reason why the title of the program is Filling Power Vacuums, plural, not just one, the vacuum of the presidency, it's vacuums, is because I personally believe that there's a multitude of conservative-driven industries right now that just don't have leadership, at least not capable leadership. I mean academia. I mean politics. I mean religion. I mean most things right now. It just seems like we're all swimming in a sea looking for direction, or we're all just a bunch of rudderless ships. Now, I want to ask Zig how your interactions have been at the doors, man. I'll tell one anecdote from my side just to bring everyone up to speed as to why I think this is an important topic right now. I'll get Zig's take and see where Shine's coming from for his. But I knocked on this guy's door the other day. Really awesome guy. Nice dude. He came to the door, and before I even got done saying anything, he came barreling out of the front door. He head knocked on the screen door and everything. He was just so ready to give me a piece of his mind. Flew open that front door, head knocked on the screen door, had to push that out of the way, almost knocked the thing out of the screen, right? The first thing he said is, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about Governor Kemp. Just went on this tirade about Governor Kemp and how corrupt he is and how he needs to be taken down. Then he started talking about the Secretary of State here in the state of Georgia, how he's going to bring them all down, how he literally just got finished writing a handwritten note to both of those individuals, letting him know. And the only thing he wanted me to know, after he talked to me for 15 minutes, I tried to get away. 15 minutes, this guy kept talking to me, right? The only thing he wanted me to know is how upset he was with the election being stolen. And eventually, at the very end, I finally got in there. And so by the way, do you plan on voting for Senator Perdue? Well, of course. Oh, yeah, well, of course I vote for. I'm going to vote for. I did it once before. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to vote for that Kelly lady too. You know, you already got my vote. Now, let me tell you about. And he went on there with the rest of his little spiel. But what was important to him was not maintaining the Senate. What was important to him was not the idea that if you can't fight for liberty, you must maintain gridlock. What was important to him was that guy, President Trump, it was that dude. It was maintaining the presidency. And I'm just, in a sense of playing devil's advocate, I'm just starting to wonder if it's healthy for Republicans, conservatives, or anybody that believes in the constitutional framework to desire that much power in either a single man or a single office. I have an article here from the 10th Amendment Center that's going to get us into that, but let me kick it over to Zig first. Ask you, buddy, how's your door knocking going? Have you seen anything similar? Or lastly, what do you make of that topic in general?
The experience that I've had at the doors is either people were definitely voting for David Perdue or they definitely were not voting for David Perdue. There really has been no middle ground. Actually, there was one lady who I spoke to. She said, I'm undecided. And I said, okay, I can understand that. We are knocking on doors for Senator David Perdue because he supports things like less taxes, which is important during a time of recession. So that way you have more of your money to spend freely. And also he supports an open market healthcare. So that way the government doesn't get involved and slow down COVID tests, which it did in fact do. And the ladies seem to understand and appreciate that point, but it has been pretty polarized out here. But to me, that doesn't make any sense because there's no reason for Democrats or Republicans to support a strong executive. Democracy is predicated on the notion that the people will have say. If one person has to say that, then that's not the people speaking. And Republicans obviously can't support a strong executive because that's contrary to what a republic was supposed to be. That's why we had states' rights. That's why we have the 10th Amendment, because we had fled tyranny. And so to have one guy making shots that are calling all the shots, that should be something that folks on both sides of the aisle agree that we need to limit executive power, limit executive orders, and also limit the administrative state.
Now, let me ask this, though, Zig, and I want Shine's take on this as well before we move too much into this 10th Amendment Center article. You said we need to pursue this idea of limiting executive power, but does limiting executive power, is that somehow or in some sense synonymous with making Republicans easier to steamroll? Do you get what I'm saying, man? Because like I'm trying to be a realist here, or at least at a minimum a pragmatist. Okay, I'm realizing that if Democrats see a sign of weakness, especially in the sense that now that our guy's gone, we're going to try and limit more executive authority. Well, I mean, they're going to take that over as well too. They're going to just keep using and using and using, abusing and abusing. And I think some Republicans are stuck in this idea right now. Is like, look, unless and until we get another person like Trump who just doesn't care about the outcomes, he just doesn't care about being the scapegoat, he just doesn't care about what your politics say, he's just going to get something done for the American people. This is the rhetoric I've been hearing for the last couple of days here. The rhetoric I've been hearing is we need a man like this because no one else has the fortitude to do it. No one else has the ability to say it right now. And we are willing to give a little bit more power, to almost cede a little bit of personal power or state power into the executive branch, because Donald Trump will do things that we enjoy him doing or that we like doing, or at least we'll get some sense of dignity back. I think a lot of Republicans right now are feeling like we've been trampled and stomped on. It's about time that we stop turning the other cheek. Look, man, Christ called us to turn the other cheek, but I don't think he called us to be doormats. You get what I'm saying? And again, Zig, I'm playing devil's advocate because I agree with you, right?
And I can understand that because during the George Bush years, a number of people continued to ridicule Republicans and Republican ideas because the media framed it as George Bush being slow or, kind of dumb, quite frankly. And so I can understand the frustration, but the reason why Congress can't get anything done is because people don't believe in Congress. Okay. And two, people don't know what Congress is supposed to do or what the Senate is supposed to be. And because they don't know those things, which is through no fault of their own, it's largely public education, which doesn't have an interest in teaching the Federalist Papers, then people turn to the president. But I think as people continue to get more educated about what a republic is and what the Federalists say, then we won't have to rely on a strong executive. And also, there was a book by a group of Republicans in the late 80s, early 90s called the Imperial Congress. You had Republicans arguing against the power of Congress. Okay. As far back as, 30 years ago? So has Republicans get caught back up to what it really means to be a Republican, which isn't just about a logo with an elephant on it. Then we'll have more faith in Congress.
Sherry said in Facebook a second ago, she said, are you encountering other activists? No, we haven't. I've encountered, we've encountered other activists from other organizations like the NRA or the Federalist Society or people directly working for Senator Loeffler or Senator Perdue's campaign, but I've not encountered a single to date, either in North Carolina or in Georgia or anywhere during the campaign season. I don't know about you, Zig, but I did not encounter a single other activist or even evidence that another activist had been there in person. No door flyers, nothing like that, right? I don't know if they're out there. Sherry also said in Facebook a second ago here, based on what you're seeing on the ground, do you think the election was stolen in Georgia? And I'll answer that this way. Whether I see evidence of that or not, I don't even think it matters. In Shine, look, I know Shine's back there pushing buttons, buddy. Just jump into any of this at any point and cut me off. Let me know if you got an opinion on any of this, because I know he's running stuff behind the scenes. He's got a whole studio down here just like making stuff happen. But Sherry said in Facebook, do you think it was stolen in Georgia? And what I'm saying is, I don't think it matters if there's evidence for that or not right now. The simple fact of the matter is that Republicans have become convinced that it has been, that there is some type of nefarious plot at play. And I think, you can look into the past and say that there are certainly opportunities to influence an election, to influence the actual ballot box. This used to be a fairly bipartisan approach, that the opportunity to do something nefarious during an election was always there. John Oliver just reported on this in 2019. Just a year and 3 months ago, John Oliver did a 45-minute piece. Go watch the thing if you don't believe me. A 45-minute piece on almost every single thing that Sidney Powell's making claims on right now. So you can be guaranteed that if this was happening the other way, Democrats would be losing their minds right now. But what I'm saying is, I don't think it matters if there's evidence or not. I think it matters to prove it. What matters right now is that we do something to reinstill the trust back into the system. And the point that I'm trying to make tonight, as I get into the beginning of this 10th Amendment Center article, is that I don't know how many people are going to take offense to this. And frankly speaking, I think it's about time we start having this conversation. I just don't think that the outcome of a presidential election or the outcome of who is or isn't on the Supreme Court should make this much of a difference to people in Tennessee. It should make this much of a difference to people in California. The federal government was never meant to have that much power to begin with. As we get into this article from the 10th Amendment Center, read this. Thomas Jefferson called the 10th Amendment. I'll read the 10th Amendment in a second. The foundation of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment says, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Now, to the people would get a little bit more into the 9th Amendment. Thomas Jefferson said that article
That amendment, that language was the foundation of the Constitution. And what he means is that we only have a federal government because this grand experiment was supposed to be 50 little mini countries that just ceded barely enough power to have some type of articulable federal government. Because the idea is we could be much better protected if there's a big overarching federal government that could do some things. Now, the Articles of a Confederation had virtually no teeth at all. So they went up there and created the Constitution carte blanche out of whole cloth, just cloth out of nothing at all. And the idea was that all these little individual states were going to still lead their way. So fundamentally speaking, unless we are at war with somebody else, creating treaties or doing something that the executive branch constitutionally should have power over, it shouldn't matter nearly as much as we are making it out to matter who the president is. Now, I get it. Granted, that's where we are right now, right, Mr. Henry? Doesn't matter. The Commerce Clause is what it is. Federal government overreach is what it is. We have to deal with the situation. Well, do we, though? Because this tells us, the 10th Amendment of Thomas Jefferson tells us that the federal government was meant to be very limited. In fact, you should barely even know that it exists. One can make the argument, as we just did, that if structured properly, the fact that Trump lost would just be kind of a, well, whatever, we'll see tomorrow type thing. As long as Tennessee is doing well, as long as my representative in Tennessee is representing on my behalf, as long as my representative, Burchett, or whoever it might be, is going up there and voting for my stuff, it shouldn't matter nearly that much as to who the president is. Yet, here we are, obsessing over virtually anything and everything as a do or die national issue. It is not just frustrating. I believe it perverts the entirety of the American experiment on its head. And if we buy into this sickness, and want our person to do it the same way that it was done to us, it creates a perpetual retribution cycle that nobody will ever win. That is a winless game. Not only is it a winless game, I believe it's a game that conservatives are bad at. And that's not anything to be discounted. It's not anything as a to put someone down. That's a compliment. We should be bad at that terrible game of progressivism. In the Kentucky Resolutions of 1798, Thomas Jefferson warned us of the following, quote, "In questions of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution." I'll say it again because I just can't say it any better than Jefferson himself. 1798, he said this, "In questions of power, let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down for mischief by chains of the Constitution." What he meant is that man is fallible. All men are fallible. Anybody that you would put into this position of power is fallible. They will fail you. It is inevitable. As sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, someone is going to let you down in positions of power. So it's not the man that should be idolized. It's not the position of power that should be idolized. It's the Constitution that creates restraints upon that power that should be shut down, that should be idolized. Why, you might say? Because power corrupts, obviously. And as Lord Acton said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, sadly, as we see in the 10th Amendment Senator article here, Americans have let politicians in Washington, D.C. have almost absolute power. I realize this. Y'all realize this. States have become more subsidiaries of D.C. Your rights are now subject to the whims of an entire political class. But again, let me say, even in recognizing that this is where we are as a federal government, this is the same case, whether it's with Team A or B. I know people don't like the analogy of the left wing and the right wing being the same, left wing and right wing of the same bird. But this is what I'm saying. If it works for Trump's tomorrow, it will be your detriment the next year. If we're winning with Trump today, God forbid it's a Bernie Sanders the following day, because whatever executive power you put there now, do you think someone else is not going to use that to their advantage? I guess what I'm really saying is, as much as we possibly can for conservatives, take this power back, claw this power back, take self-responsibility. I'm going to get oddly controversial here, especially with my Christian friends, okay? And I have about half this article left to go that I want to get through, and I'm going to kick it to Sean and Zig here and get some Facebook comments as well. But for our Christian friends out in the audience in particular, I personally believe that over about the last 60 or 70 years, Christians have been allowing things to be crammed down their throats with nothing else being said. We've been sitting by the wayside. We've been griping and grumbling, and you'll certainly can hear when we complain about it. That is for sure. But you've not been going up to the legislature. You haven't been lobbying on behalf of any things you believe in. You have not been, dare I say, preaching from the pulpit as to what you believe in. You have not been talking legislation to your congregation. Even other conservatives, you have not been doing the things necessary to be a part of the political process. And it develops this sense of angst and anger and fairly justified turmoil. I will give you that. None of what they did on the other side was a constitutional process. It wasn't fair game. They completely altered the rules. I totally get that. I do. But we kind of let it happen. And then we took all that bottled up angst that we've been dealing with for half a century and we just gave it to Donald Trump. We just put it in the power of a single man. And for at least 4 years, he was doing some great stuff, man. He really was. He was getting a lot of stuff done. He was making a lot accomplished. He said something was going to happen. Aside from the wall, most of what he said was going to happen happened. I'm talking like, look, man, renegotiating deals with Mexico, Canada, Japan, South Korea, all of the EU. I'm talking cutting regulations by more than any of the previous administration in my lifetime. He said he was going to cut 3 regulations for every new one added. I think he cut 7 regulations for every new one added. We had not just towering record economy, record unemployment. He now has a massive swing over a realignment of party people that are supporting him with different demographics. He's talking about moving moving the industry in Jerusalem. He just did it in a single day. Okay, he did a lot of stuff. But in some sense, what I'm saying is you can't just take up this bottled angst that you have for half a century and give it to a single guy. What happens when he's not there? Dude, God forbid. And I know he's out of this now. But what would have happened to all of that if something terrible would have went down with the COVID situation? I mean, seriously, what would have happened if he's just not there? What happens now if he loses this election? The point I'm making is self-responsibility is the solution to all of this. Self-responsibility always has been the solution to all of this. Taking back and clawing back power from the federal government and putting back it into the objective, tangible principles that we have all always shared. From the very beginning of conservatism, through the Federalist Papers, on the backs of David Hume and everyone else that built us to where we are right now. This Lockean philosophy that built the conservative party, that stuff, man. If it's fine in your little local municipality and if it's working out through states, then it's usually pretty good. It shouldn't matter what this president is saying. And it's up to us to take some of this back. And it can be done. And it will be done. But the point I'm making is right now, we have to do something about it. And I'm starting to point that finger back at myself. I'm getting less and less angry at Democrats because this isn't just me seeing glass half full. This isn't just me seeing the better side of every human being. This isn't the downfall of Mr. Henry of always giving the benefit of the doubt. I'm blaming Democrats less and less. Because why would you? Why would you blame them? What else would you expect to happen? What else would you expect the outcome to be? If I can't blame them, then obviously the only other solution is to look back inwards on myself. On his way out of his farewell address, George Washington advised the following, quote, "Let there be no change by usurpation. For though this, in one instant, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. Let there be no usurpation. For this, in one instant, may be the instrument of good. It is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed." And following that lesson, James Madison took that advice on his last day in office. James Madison vetoed an infrastructure spending bill with which he had great favor, which would have been under his administration, would have made him look awesome, and would have accomplished several things that James Madison wanted to accomplish during his presidency. But he saw this as an exercise of his power, not delegated to the federal government in the Constitution. That kind of integrity is almost non-existent right now in DC or anywhere else. That's the kind of integrity that I'm looking for. And if I can't find it in a federal politician, I'm going to find it in myself. I'm going to find it in my church group. I'm going to find it with other people that are like-minded. I'm going to find it in Tennessee, man. Most people are more wrapped up in party politics and policies and personalities than they actually are in principles. So when this guy or that gal or anybody else is in power, they don't worry about things like limited government or constitutional restraints because it's good for me and mine. They enjoy the fact that their guy can get stuff done and implement policies like that. The problem is, again, who's in charge? The problem is that power will exist perpetually on into the future. Never forget that every power you give the government will eventually be back in the hands of people that you do not like and you do not agree with. Now, I've been ranting here for what is this now? I don't know. 15, 20 minutes or something like that. Let me kick it to Zig and kick it to Sean. I want some commentary, man. Am I going too much? Was there still a chance for Trump? Should I be talking about what to do after Trump already, man? You get what I'm saying?
No, I think it would be healthy for most folks to move on. Move on, get back on board with something that will help you win. If you look at the last 100 years, folks who typically identify as conservative have actually forgotten or lost or never read Republican philosophy. If you look at the great conservative thinkers of the last 100 years, they have never made reference to the Federalist. Meanwhile, folks on the other side of the aisle pointing to the Communist Manifesto has their North Star. We have lost our North Star, and that should be the Federalist Papers. And if we were better able to articulate philosophy, true Republican philosophy, as found in the Federalist Papers, we wouldn't be in the predicament that we're in with having a strong executive. But
Mm.
Republicans have been philosophically outmanned and outmatched by progressives. Anybody who goes to college is subject to progressive philosophy. Progressives know their progressive philosophy, but do Republicans know their Republican philosophy? I bet not, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in right now.
Jonathan said in Facebook he blames the piss out of them for cheating. He said there's no fair election in Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania, goodness, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or California, or for that matter, Nashville, Tennessee. Shine, let me kick it to you, man, because Shine has a very unique ability to just see through trash. Right? Shine has sort of a Superman-like ability to see paradigms just before they happen, and possibly what's really going on, man. I don't know, dude. What do you make of this right now? Should people continually fight? Where are they?
I think everybody needs to make up their own mind for themselves how they react to certain stimuli or news and things like that. And I especially with something as sensitive as what you're talking about, like, should you fight what? How should you fight? Like, I don't know. This is a complicated, weird time. Um, as much trouble as we've had in this country over the course of our history, and we're talking about historical perspective, I don't, at least since World War II, right? Since the New World was made, I can't think of a time in the United States where around 50% of people thought our presidential election was a crock.
Hmm.
So that's important context. And that's not necessarily me saying it is or isn't. What I'm saying, according to polling data right now, are like 47% of Republicans and 30% of Democrats thought that there were anomalous things in the election that don't make sense and deserve investigation. And that's weird. That's a weird place to be. It'd be one thing if it was obvious and only 10 or 15% of people thought, something's wrong here. But almost half the country does. And I don't have enough historical context to know what are the most likely outcomes in a republic when that is the case.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I go, because I use a lot of times I look at historical context and say, what did humans do before in a similar situation? We are in fairly new ground. And I mean, some of the context I can say is in the state of Tennessee in 1947, the only successful revolution against a government in the United States took place over the feeling that an election was not handled correctly.
Oh, yeah.
In Athens, Tennessee. In 1947, a group of returning veterans from World War II seized an armory, went down to the county jail where the sheriff's deputies had brought all the ballots and were counting in secret, put it under siege for hours, and took the jail and deposed the county sheriff and the county mayor and literally reformed the county by forming a new charter with the state of Tennessee, getting legal experts to come down from the University of Tennessee to do it. And so what I'm saying is, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, it made people take up arms against their local government in McMinn County. And President Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, wrote a great op-ed about it. I would encourage everyone to read the op-ed by, I can't remember her name, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt's wife wrote an op-ed and it was published all over the world about the Battle of Athens. And so that's just some historical context of, like, you're saying, what should people do? I have no idea. Probably pray.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I have no idea what's going on. I mean, there is a group in Ohio and two prominent lawyers that are aligned with Trump calling for martial law today and saying that Trump should have a federal election controlled by the military, a redo of the election. And I'm not saying that's not going to happen, probably. Probably. But if you have people in 2020 suggesting that as a remedy for things, what are they saying in 2030? Get what I'm saying? The
Yeah.
Overton window is shifting in an entirely dangerous way, and I think it's a healthy exercise in thought that you're doing right now, saying this is what the North Star should be, and Zig talking about what the North Star should be. That is very healthy, and it's things that we should talk about with each other. It's things we should teach our children. Um, because at this point the solutions are long term. We didn't get here where we're at today overnight. We didn't start down this road 4 years ago when Trump got elected, right, Grant? We
Yeah.
started going down this road a long time ago, where the executive branch has taken over the functions of almost every other part of government, including the states. Um, and if they're not doing it, they reserve the power to do it at any time they deem necessary. Correct?
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's calling for any new powers, Grant. That's another thing that's so sad. Nobody's calling for any new executive powers. They already exist.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you that. That is true.
I mean, the NDAs, the National Defense Authorization Acts, since 2001, over the course of that time, have authorized everything you could possibly think of. I mean, everything from the president being able to turn off all communications in the United States, all telephones, all TV, all internet can be flipped off because of national security. Anyone in the United States, including but not limited to American citizens, can be detained indefinitely. Right now, that is legal. It is legal for the CIA to do propaganda against its own citizens.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you could possibly, like a dictator's wish list, is legal in the United States. It's just nobody, as far as we know, acts on it on a regular basis.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if they do, they don't wrap up people
Well,
actually.
What is supposed to stop some of that is something like the congressional. Well,
Well,
some degree,
I'm not talking about what's supposed to happen. I'm talking about what is. You know what I'm saying? And I think y'all did a great job in both of y'all's comments over the course of the show talking about the way it should be, and it should be that way. But I would
Well,
encourage people generally. I don't talk about what you see. Don't ever call for violence, ever, to anyone. Not even like joking around with buddies outside smoking a cigarette at work. Don't ever call for violence in the name of politics. Ever. Don't do it. Don't be that guy. You are literally making the Overton window move in an entirely negative direction when you do that. But as far as everything else, do what you think is right. If you feel like your government should be doing something, then contact your representatives that represent you and ask them to do it. But I don't know what else you do besides just be an engaged person and engaging on the grassroots level, voting when it's time to vote, making friends with, contacting your legislators and getting in a relationship there so you can move things the way you want to. I don't know if there's anything more that a regular person should hope to do or is safe to do than do that.
And I have to recognize here what Sherry said in the comment that Eric followed up after that in Facebook, because it points out a massive flaw in the argument that I'm trying to push for. This argument of like, just stick to objective principles, just stick to the idea of what you know to be rational and reasonable and true. And eventually people will come back around. Reality will return. You can actually have calm, cordial dialogue and exchange of ideas, and you won't have to beat the other person. Sherry said, but the problem is pitching that idea makes you very, very vulnerable. And people will take advantage of that. States will take advantage of that. And when I say state, I mean governmental entities will take advantage of that. Sherry said on Facebook, shouldn't we fix the system if it's broken? Shouldn't we fix the system if it's broken? A very, very simple question, to which Eric followed up by saying, and finding the fix may require finding a tool to change the system. Because we found out very recently here in Nashville, the system we are working with to make the change just gave itself the means to knock down our efforts at every turn. How do you fix a broken system with a broken system? Do you understand what Eric's saying? We just tried to work on this property tax situation here. We got the number of signatures required. We followed the letter of the law to the best of what we thought our knowledge was. And that very system kicked it to a legal system of which they control. They chose the attorneys. I mean, goodness gracious, man, they got the former state Supreme Court Justice himself, William Koch Jr., to represent their cause. Of course, there was only going to be one outcome here.
So in a broken system, whereby the broken system defends itself with the tools of that broken system, what is it other than just a perpetuation of the same broken system? And I get that. And to both of their points, this, right, you're seeing on your screen right now is yet a little bit more of the reason as to why maybe you need to start playing some hardball. I personally don't think you do. Now, I do need to recognize, before I get into the final topic of the day of the program today, which is our op-ed royale, I do need to recognize what I am calling for is a little bit of a long game that will cause us to lose terrible battles in the process. What I am calling for is looking ahead 5 to 10 to 20 to 100 years from now, whereby we will actually win the war, but that will mean a decimation of some battles. It will mean a loss of some rights. It will mean, to some small extent, subjugation of both your worldview and possibly even your person. I don't want to hide that at all. And I'm not trying to paint some apocalyptic future where we're entering the times of Daniel, where we're being taken over by some force. I'm not there yet. But look at what you're seeing on your screen right now. This is the op-ed royale for today. Supreme Court blocks New York religious restrictions. Okay, cool, awesome, round of applause. So hold on. So this is where we are. We're now excited about the fact that one of, if not the most fundamental amendment belief protection that we have in our Constitution. Mr. Henry, you just told us this whole Constitution was going to protect everything. That's the objective standard we're supposed to be fighting for. That's the polar star, right? Well, now what am I supposed to do? Openly applaud the fact that the most basic Supreme Court decision that could have possibly been made was split 5-4 and barely survived? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Here's the op-ed royale. Supreme Court blocks New York religious restrictions. Now, this is the decision that came down. The Supreme Court late Wednesday night, that's last Wednesday night, right before Thanksgiving here, granted requests from the Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn and 2 Orthodox Jewish synagogues to block enforcement of a New York executive order restricting attendance at houses of worship. Both of these places, dioceses and the synagogues, claimed that the executive order violated the right to free exercise of religion guaranteed by the First Amendment, particularly when secular businesses in the area are allowed to remain open. Now, you know what we do here in the op-ed royale. We hear from the right, we hear from the left. But I want to start with the alleged libertarian perspective, because this is not a libertarian perspective. At least it's not supposed to be. This is literally just describing something called constitutional scrutiny. When you get a constitutional case that comes through the court system, there are 3 levels or 3 tiers of scrutiny. And we're not going to get into that right now, but just take it for my word that if something is like allegedly or about to, if a alleged piece of legislation is going to violate your First Amendment, then you have to be really clear. Like, it's the highest level of constitutional scrutiny. You got to have a darn good reason. Not only do you have to have a darn good reason to do that, the law that you're trying to pass has to be it's called narrowly tailored. It has to be so laser focused that it just touches that one thing. If the state's going to take away your right, it's got to have a really good reason, and it just has to focus with that one thing. That's the top level of constitutional scrutiny. Listen to the alleged libertarian perspective. It is undisputed that both the Brooklyn Diocese and the synagogue, which sued Cuomo on behalf of the Orthodox synagogues it represented, were following strict COVID-19 safety protocols. So pause. It is undisputed, meaning these were stipulated facts in the court case that both sides agreed upon. Neither side was arguing that the synagogue or this church was doing things that were in blatant violation of the COVID safety protocols. What does that mean? They were wearing face masks. They were physically distancing. Anything that you had to do while in a physical space with another human being, they were doing those things. Those are undisputed, stipulated facts that both sides agreed upon. Now, I mean legal sides. And clearly CNN's not going to say that happened. You're not going to get that commentary from CNN. What I'm talking about is in the courtroom, both sides, said, okay, fine. We will stipulate that they were following everything they were supposed to follow. It is also undisputed. Here's another big point. It was also undisputed that no disease clusters have been tied to their institutions since they reopened. None of them, not a single one of them. No disease clusters had been tied to either one of their institutions since they reopened. The plaintiffs were not asking to carry on as if COVID-19 did not exist. They were instead arguing that Cuomo's policy singled out houses of worship for especially harsh treatment and was not narrowly tailored to serve the compelling state interest of curtailing the epidemic. That's the language that I'm talking about right now. So this is not a libertarian perspective. This is just strictly what constitutional scrutiny is. This is just what the Supreme Court said. To me, it should be that simple until we go up here from the Washington Post. This is from the left. Let's read what the Washington Post says. This shift is bringing with it a notable testiness among the justices. In his concurring opinion in the New York case, Justice Gorsuch took aim at Roberts and the liberal dissenters, accusing them of sending the Constitution on a holiday during a pandemic. Roberts swatted back with his customary restraint. The dissenters, he wrote, simply view the matter differently after careful study and analysis reflecting their best efforts to fulfill their responsibility under the Constitution. This is not the first time we have seen tension between Roberts, who strives to tamp down the court's perceived
That isn't really a
politicization.
rebuttal, by the way.
I'm
not jumping into to throw sour grapes, but I would expect more from the Chief Justice of defending himself in a more articulated, merit-based argument than we know better than the dissenters know better. I mean, I really feel like, don't we just have the worst crop of elites in the history of the United States? Like, I mean, it's not that they're like completely. I mean, I'm sure John Roberts has 20 points more IQ than I do. He has a very well-to-do law degree. But dang it, I just expect more from the Chief Justice than I'm smarter, or the dissenters were smarter than the majority. That's all he just said, and that's disappointing. That's just hugely disappointing.
And again, I go back to the comment that Sherry and Eric made when they're talking about, okay. So I like the idea of what you're saying, Mr. Henry. We need to focus on these constitutional principles. But bro, when you have the people in the Supreme Court, like you just said, Shine, that are making these arguments back to me, like, we just understand the Constitution better than you do. Well, how do I not look at that and say, well, that's also part of the broken system, is it not? When we have Gorsuch and Roberts that are two allegedly conservative justices that are pinging back and forth, how can you then, Mr. Henry, make the argument to me that we don't need to be very concerned about what the Supreme Court is and is not doing? Let me cover this one real quick. All right. This is from CNN. We can go another one here. Let's cover the Salt Lake Tribune. New York actually cut churches a small break, allowing a small number of people inside of them while completely closing down comparable venues such as Madison Square Garden and Broadway theaters. I suppose those are comparable venues. The court's ruling did not give the churches in New York equal rights. It gave them special rights, something that conservatives used to be against. So now it's my problem. Now it's our fault. Now
that's another thing that's sad. Out of the Salt Lake Tribune, a state that actually people died for their religious faith in Utah. People had their property seized. 36,000 troops marched on Utah when they said that they wouldn't. I mean, they were doing some stuff that nobody would agree with. I mean, let's be honest about that. But they were doing it based on their religious faith, and people died for it in Utah. That is just so sad that they would flip the whole thing around and say they got special privileges. That's just sad. It's sad. What a sad time to live with these people who the voices that get elevated are more disappointing every day than, I don't know, just more disappointing every day.
I'm wondering who compares an Elton John concert to worshiping Jesus Christ.
I hear you, Zig. Dude.
Oh man, I knew you get to go to Elton John. Let's carry on a crusade. I'm going to hell because I didn't see Elton John. I mean, I don't understand in what dimension that's comparable.
No, I get you. And what Zig is talking about, look, it's not about the number of people in the crowd. It's not about whether or not they're projecting their voice loud enough to have saliva carry. What Zig is talking about is, okay, you're not going to an Elton John concert for some type of legitimate spiritual fulfillment, right? You're not going to an Elton John concert because you think there's some type of mandate or dictate upon your life that you must
Rock
pursue.
Concerts are not a 10,000, 20,000-year-old institution.
Yeah, dude,
like
right?
religion.
Right?
Yeah. Rock concerts are actually a fairly new thing. The first people to ever fill a stadium was in the 60s, and it was the Beatles. All other concerts before that were in halls of 100 to 500 max. So like large rock concerts, like things at Madison Square Garden, are only like 60 years old. Whereas, Christianity's a good 2,000. Judaism, at least 6,000, maybe more. Maybe 10,000, depending on how you date things and things like that. But we live in a weird world, Grant, where people are comparing rock concerts It's not a religious service. If you're talking about Catholics and people of the Jewish faith, those are like sacraments. Going to church is not a form of worship. It's a form of sacrifice or whatever. It's like an ultimate present to your God. It's not just like a club thing. Like we're all getting together because we believe the same thing. We're going to hang out. Both of those religions are fairly. I'm not going to get into the minutia of it. You get what I'm saying. They're doing a serious thing. They're not doing something for fun or whatever. They're. I mean, this is Orthodox Jews. These are Orthodox Jews and Catholics. This is like two of the most serious controlling your life religions there are. I mean, I don't know. Once again, the voices that are elevated to parse nuance in our society are just disappointing. They're either dumb, which I think is the case in some cases, or like they just have an overt bias. They're not actually explaining information. Their whole motivation is moving you to a certain direction that they want you to be going in. And I think at this point, like they're so bad at that, they're not even good at it. Someone like me, you just read a couple sentences and you know exactly who that person is. Like you know that you're not reading something and you're going to be informed. If you sit there and read the whole way through, you might be brainwashed by the end. Because like they are using certain techniques that do work, but it's just disappointing. Where are the real adults? We're all getting up into our mid-30s now, and you think when you're in your early 20s or a teenager, there's these really smart, good people must be running everything because my life is so good. When I was a kid, I was like, my life is pretty great. So someone awesome must have made this happen. Maybe it was just really, really awesome people who lived maybe 2 or 3 generations ago, and we're still living off that awesome. But I don't know. As the older I get, I figure out that there's not smart people on the top floor, or at least people. They're not people I should look up to.
Yeah,
no, that's even more disappointing because you want to look up to people. You want you want to like say, okay, I want to be more like that guy. But that happens to me less and less as I get older. Rarer and rarer.
Well, let me end the program here. We'll go through one more local topic here as we end the program. And as we're transitioning into this final local topic, of which we'll be talking about vaccines. Yeah, I know, right? I want to say that as we're knocking doors in Georgia, I think Zig and Sean would back me up by this. I am not just encouraged and enthusiastic, but I have no doubts that I think we'll maintain the Senate. And I do mean from Perdue and Loeffler both. People get it here. They understand. I can't even, I used to have this little spiel that I would go on. It's like, listen, the eyes of the nation are upon Georgia right now. We need this to maintain. I can't even get through the word eyes before they interrupt me and say, listen, I know, buddy. I get it. They are more fired up than I am. And I do politics for a living. They are more fired up than I ever have been. And I don't consider this just a passion. I think the three of us here, maybe not in a spiritual sense, would consider it a calling. I would. I know I definitely would. I don't know if I could speak for Shine or Zig, but I feel like I'm doing something spiritual by even working for this company and doing stuff. That's how passionate I am about being in this state. They are more. The people that were knocking in those doors gets it even more than that. They know they got to show up. They know they have to show up in droves. Now, while they are a little bit let down about the fact that they think regardless of if I show up, it's not going to matter, we're still going to lose. I do hope that they will understand that when they do win, that will reinstill a bit of faith in the institution, a bit of faith in the process, and a bit of integrity back into the flag itself, dare I say. But let me finish with this here. And it's going to come directly from the show notes. This is a little bit of what you're looking at right now. Click on the Evernote link if you want to follow along. You get cool things like the fact that if you were to click on this link as you're about to see right now, you'd probably get paywalled, as I'm about to do here in a second. See? Yep, paywalled. But with the Evernote link, you don't have to worry about that because it's all there for you. Here's the headline from the Epoch Times or Epic Times, or whatever you want to say. Tennessee won't, importantly, let me highlight this here for you, won't mandate COVID-19 vaccinations in public schools. And I want to book in this entire thing with the title of the program today, as we see right here, filling power vacuums, not just in politics. I'm hoping we can take the lessons that we talked about today from the very first story here, of that the federal government should be barely existent, that you should take some of this power back yourself. I'm not just talking about political power vacuums. I'm talking at an institutional level across the board. I'm talking about Hollywood power vacuums. I'm talking about acting, directing power vacuums. I'm talking about sports. I'm talking about academia. Literally, there's a power vacuum to be filled.
take my word for it. I promise you, this leftist pitch of victimizer and victim, of oppressor and oppressed, that will no longer work within about 5 to 10 years from now. I don't have time to explain why that will be. Just take my word for it right now. When these vacuums start to bubble up across all industries, you right now looking at this, you have to do something about it. You have to coalesce with your fellow man, convince them that you are right through long, drawn-out processes, a reasonable dialogue, and exchange of ideas, so that when we cement these in stone, it's done. Because look, we'll end the program today. This headline, I'm sure a lot of y'all appreciate. But it's also because we have Governor Lee. We could be living anywhere else. I don't know, man. If you're in Nashville, take an hour and 45-minute trip north, and you're probably not feeling the same way in Kentucky, are you? Now, granted, that's probably the way it's meant to be with these 50 little mini countries, but that's also what I'm saying. This whole sort of top-down approach, it makes less and less sense as you get further away from a state. It makes more and more sense as you get closer together, because it's cool in Tennessee, because I live in Tennessee. I don't live in Kentucky, so frankly, I don't really care what they're doing up there. That's the way it should be sometimes. Here's the story. Tennessee Governor Lee said Tuesday that once the CCP virus vaccines become available, they will be optional for states K through 12 public school students. When asked at a press conference whether he's in favor of mandatory COVID-19 vaccines for students and staff K through 12s, he replied that he does not foresee a mandate for Tennessee's school system. Quote, here it is. What I think about vaccines is that they're going to be very important for us in the state to curb the virus and ultimately really be able to handle it. He went on to say that, but vaccines are a choice. Vaccines are a choice, and people have the choice and will have the choice in this state as to whether or not they should take the vaccine. That will be our strategy, and that is what we think will happen across the state. Now, that last part, okay, what we think will happen across the state, that part that's highlighted right there, one
So
could
important.
assume it is.
You could start the whole. He could have started it with that. The quote could have started with, "Well, this is what we think will happen across the state." You know?
Yeah.
And man, you know what that means? Tennessee, you're awesome. That's what it means. By the way, Governor Lee knows it's not just about Governor Lee, is what I'm saying, Grant. Governor Lee knows you, as a Tennessean, value freedom to choose. And the fact that he can recognize that is great. The fact that it's true is way better. How about that?
Now, part of exactly right what Shine said, and for two different reasons here. Part of what Governor Lee is saying here a second ago, where he said he thinks this is going to be implemented across the state. I assume for two different reasons this may still be a problem. It may be a problem, one, because the health boards may have a different say in, say, Knox County or Davidson County or Shelby County or any of the other 6 counties that it's applied to. And secondarily, because of this piece that I highlighted right here. Under Tennessee's state law, parents are allowed to not, we got to slow this down. They are allowed to not immunize their children for robust religious reasons, as long as the state is, quote, in the absence of epidemic or immediate threat of an epidemic. Now, that's a very convoluted way to say you can cite a religious reason as to why you don't vaccinate your kids, but if we're in the middle of a legitimate, actual, qualified, stated pandemic, you can't do that. You have to get your kid vaccinated. That is currently Tennessee state law. Now, pause. A bill introduced in the Tennessee legislature just last week, we talked about this on this program, would remove the provision that limits the religious exemptions from school and work vaccination requirements in the case of an epidemic. That's, again, a very convoluted way to say there is a bill that was just introduced last week that would say, even in a pandemic, even if there is an epidemic going on, you can still cite a religious reason as to why you don't want to vaccinate your kid. Now, this poses a very strange question for several religious people as to, do you actually have a religious reason, or are you just going to lie about your religious reason to not vaccinate? I'm not getting into that conversation. It's not the point of this. It just creates a different philosophical ball of wax there. Now, this bill has been introduced by Jay Reedy in the House and Mark Pody, oddly enough, in the Senate. The proposed legislator would allow this. We just talked about this, but that still has to go through. So again, we'll end the program on this. I'll hit some Facebook comments on the way out. But I just want to bookend both these things of starting at a federal level and saying, look, man, we would be losing our minds if President Biden, I said that, if President Biden 2 or 3 months from now tried to implement a nationwide order to say that you have to vaccinate yourself. We couldn't necessarily be mad if we gave the executive that much power. And I do mean we, the country, all of us. Conversely, on the other hand, we're all kind of okay with Governor Lee saying this. because it's in Tennessee. It makes a little bit more a little bit more sense. The more you localize power, the more you squeeze this power down, the easier it is to palate. The more palatable that power is. Because if a mayor is making a decision for the people that live in his city, in his county, he probably understands what's happening in his county. And he probably understands that what works in Knox County may not work in Davidson County, or what's happening in Williamson County is probably not going to work in Davidson County. But most importantly, Biden would never understand that. No president would really understand that. Trump himself would probably not understand what works in Williamson County, Tennessee. He's not going to understand what happens in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, nor should he. How could he? Right? The point I think I'm really making here is as the power vacuums start to fill up, what are we going to fill them with? And I'm desperately just trying to warn against, as one final pitch here, I'm desperately just trying to warn against seeking after the man himself, seeking after the institution itself, seeking after that position itself to save us from ourselves. I think you and I are perfectly capable of doing that for our own. You get what I'm saying? I'm just far more fearful of what happens if somebody's in it that I don't like, because I'm telling y'all right now, it's not like it was a close race. But if this is Governor Carl Dean, we probably have a totally different situation right now. I'll kick it to Sean and Zig for some comments on the way out as I'm reading some Facebook comments here as well. And let me know what y'all think. But Zig, I don't know, man, where are you coming from this? Anything about forced vaccinations? Anything you want to talk about there?
Well, the main way to take back power is to actually become more powerful yourself. And the main way to do that, as philosophers would agree, is by becoming knowledgeable. The expression is knowledge is power. And unless you seek that knowledge yourself, you're not going to have the power, and you're going to be the one begging somebody to do things on your behalf. That's why it's incumbent upon you to go out and take responsibility and make change. And while it might be difficult and uncomfortable and unpleasant at times, that's part of the process. Go out and make a change, learn something, do something for your community. And I think at the end of the day, you can earn immortality and victory for you and many others in your community.
Kelly said in Facebook, medical freedom is fundamental to freedom in general, period. She went on to say that we have to support Tennessee stands and the two bills to support our religious exemptions. And look, I think you all know where I come from in this. It's basically verbatim what Rand Paul pitches. Anytime he has a vaccination bill up in his committee, Rand Paul says, listen, as a former and maybe even current physician, if this is a platform of persuasion, meaning if I'm talking to you as a doctor or a scientist, then I would probably try and persuade you to take a vaccination and vaccinate your children. I think there might be some science to support that it's a great idea. But I, like Rand Paul, agree that this is not a platform of persuasion. If I'm an elected representative, that is not my job to try and persuade you of what the science is and is not. If we are dealing with a piece of legislation that would force you to put something in your body, if we're dealing with this piece of legislation that would force you to put something in your body, now we have a platform of coercion. And I am never going to stand on a platform of coercion regardless of what we're talking about. I think it's a good idea. Do it. Please research, educate yourself, make your own decision.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to use the power of government to put that in your body.
Let me also say one last thing. If people believe that this is the worst time to be alive and that we are in the worst times, that is the best time to take action. That means all the great and excellent things you do, that increases your chances of becoming a hero, of becoming renowned, of making a true difference. If that's what you do, in fact, believe. Now is the time to do something. Join a podcast. Have meaningful conversations with your friends. Do more to share knowledge. But at the end of the day, that's what will make you renowned, is taking action. And I think we can lead a new renaissance with more federalism, more liberty than what we've ever had before.
When I'd say
Jonathan,
too, oh, go ahead, Grant. Sorry.
No, buddy. I was just going to hit some comments here. You definitely let them know what you think.
Well, I'd say too, if things hold at their current position and Joe Biden does become president, I think there will be a big philosophical push in the Republican Party like there was under Obama, where it was let's all go back to reading the Constitution. That all started right around the time President Obama got elected. The Republican Party became a constitutional party because it's moral high ground. You go with, you phrase things that coalesce with the Constitution, because then people can't argue with you, right? Because you're talking about,
sure,
yeah. So that's why it was done, and that's why it'll be done again. The question is how better off were we after 8 years of that? How much more constitutional were we? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, maybe more. I mean, you look at what happened during this pandemic, and even though we had a Republican, I definitely could have seen Bush doing national things as opposed to this is what I think states should do, like President Trump did.
Yeah, I hear you.
Or a
I hear you there.
governor in Tennessee saying this is what all counties should do. You know, where he kind of has left it up to people. I think that idea of Republicans recognizing what you talked about, Grant, that the government that governs closest to you governs best because they know the deal. They also will have to suffer the consequences if they make bad decisions on a more direct level than someone really far away. You know, in a town of like Knoxville, if you make 15,000 people mad, I mean, there's 250,000 people in Knoxville, but if you make 15,000 people mad, it can end your political career. Whereas if a governor makes 15,000 people in Knox County mad, it may not end his political career. And a
Yeah, you're
president,
right.
for sure, it's not going to end his political career. Because what's 15,000 out of the 100 million people who voted? You know, or I don't know how I say 100 million. I think it was just 80 for Trump, so it was way more than 100 million. But you get what I'm saying. 15,000 is a drop in the ocean. But I also agree with Zig there. What he just said, it's very Campbellite. Chaos always precedes the age of the hero. When everything is crazy, then the next phase of things is always the age of heroes. People who do something heroic and get struck down, and then you get an ultimate hero like a Hercules that embodies all the things, and it's just a whole culture of creating heroes. And I kind of like that story. That's a good positive story of going into the time we're in now. It may be a little chaotic, but it also is a time where you can be a hero. Like you can. I mean, you never know what can happen we have a guy who watches this show, Michael Stinson. We call him affectionately call him Stimpy. He had been talking to me about coming on Real News over and over again, and I said, you know what? We don't just have a lot of guest hosts anymore. That's not how we do the thing, and we're always so busy, and it's so hard to coordinate people. But I said, why don't you just turn your phone on and rant? Just talk about what's on your heart and on your mind. And he had hundreds of people watch that.
Yeah,
What if
dude.
all
Right?
of you
Yeah.
were doing that? I mean,
Yeah.
like, we're not getting paid to do this. We do this on our own free time. I mean, and if we didn't do it, we wouldn't suffer any consequences. None at all.
Yeah.
We have done this after combined, probably knocking close to 1,000 doors.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Today, yeah. Right.
You know,
Maybe over 1,000, you know?
Well, yeah. So the point that I'm making though is that if we can do this in our spare time to make a difference, it's certainly conceivable that anybody could do that. Prior to getting involved, I was just an ordinary substandard graduate student from a very rural county. That's it. I didn't have the friends, the community, or people who counted on me, but I was dedicated to make a change. I know that people out there can do the same.
And let me cut back to what we were just talking about too, Grant. Anybody ever tells me I have to put something in my body, I'm going to tell them to shove it in their own body and leave me alone. I mean,
Yes, sir,
seriously,
yes, sir.
if I do something about putting stuff in my body, it's because someone has made an argument based on merits. I will, generally speaking, and I feel like this is an American thing, but it may just be my personality. Coercion makes me want to do the opposite of what anyone's ever. If someone's telling me I have to do something, I'm going to do the opposite just to
Yeah.
show them they don't have power over me. Even if
Yeah.
I wanted to do the thing they were trying to coerce me to do anyway, I'm not going to do it. And,
Right.
and you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to not do it, and then I'm going to stomp my feet up and down and say, see what I'm doing? I'm not
Yeah.
doing what you told me to do. You know, and
Right.
that's just my personality. You have to sell me. I mean, we were talking about the scientists the other day and the lack of sales. I mean, part of the reason I don't have a lot of respect for that whole community now, generally speaking, I'm sure there's nice people. I like them, but I don't have respect generally because they don't sell me based on merits. They try to coerce me based on ad hominem and false dichotomy and even stuff more elementary than that. But it's not just them. They learned it from every other industry does it too. I mean, it's everywhere. But I'm hoping, if we have another 4 years of Democrat control, that there is an introspection. There is a what worked these past 4 years, what didn't work, and let's think more long term. I would love to see that happen, but I don't know what's going to happen. But I would love if that happened in '08 to 2016. I think we could have a great time. It would unite. I mean, everyone's united. There's more people involved in the political process than ever before. There's a lot of new people who need some kind of training and historical context. But there's a lot of great energy, not just in national politics, but in particular Tennessee politics it's on fire right now. It's on fire in like a kind of good way. There's so many people involved. They're wanting to know what's going on in their community. They're wanting to be active participants. They don't want to be passive lemmings and be told what to do. I mean, right now, after months of what would you call it, petitioning their government, the citizens of Knox County have gotten one brave county commissioner to put in an ordinance disbanding the Board of Health. And I can tell you that only came about. And, it's like, I don't know where it goes from there. As far as that goes, I don't know if they have the 6 votes to make that pass. But even it getting on the agenda in December is a big deal. It goes totally.
Dude, it's no small feat.
It's
man.
no small feat, and it goes against the normalcy bias of everyone in power in the whole United States. I mean, everyone, down to dog catchers and coroners and notary publics. I mean, everybody thinks that we should trust the medical experts and they can do no wrong. And there's nobody standing up for small business owners, service workers, things like that. And finally, someone's just saying, because to me, it's not even like a mandate, indictment of the Board of Health. It's an indictment on the fact that we have not been able to have a discussion based on the merits about these wide-ranging policies, and maybe putting in something like you will no longer have any power will elicit discussion and allow for dissent in current policies, because we have to have those discussions, those robust, sometimes heated but never violent discussions about how especially when you're making decisions for everybody. And I don't know, I'm kind of rambling and ranting, but I'm really happy about that, and I wanted to tie the medical thing into the news about the Board of Health because we hadn't talked about it yet.
Let me hit some comments on the way out here as we end the program. By the way, you guys are awesome. We love each and every one of you. We do this here tonight. We're probably going to do one maybe tomorrow night and a few more times this week. We're here in Atlanta. In Georgia until Saturday. Shine and I are. Ziggs has a similar time frame. We're going to keep bringing y'all up to date stuff. We may even do some live updates while we're on the street, showing y'all what we're actually doing, stuff like that. But Jonathan says the health board's days are very, very limited. He says they don't have the authority to do that. Now, Jonathan made that comment. We were talking about maybe the health board having a say-so in whether or not you should forcibly vaccinate your children, or at least whether you can require vaccinations to attend school. Jonathan says here his opinion is that the boards of health don't actually have the power to do that. He went on to say that we'll be feeling it with upcoming midterm elections. Michael said on the way out, I can fully guarantee that Biden will never see the big office. I will eat crow if I'm wrong, but I have seen far too much evidence presented in court to be convinced that I'm wrong. Kelly said, huge deal when she's talking about the Knoxville Board of Health. And Kelly said, good folks like you, Grant Henry, you running for office, question mark, question mark, question mark. Of course I'm running for office. You guys know this. I've spoken openly about this. I think all 3 people that do this program, and I think anybody that joins a part of this digital family.
Okay, let me just throw in here because you were vague. He's not currently running for office. He's not a candidate for any office anywhere. He has desires to maybe I'm trying to be your lawyer right now, Grant. He has desires to maybe, when the time is right, run in the future for some office yet to be named. There we go.
Well, and I'll say it this way, Sean. In Tennessee, you don't run for office. You don't say you're running for office until somebody else asks you, until somebody of a particular power or prestige or position tells you, hey, now's the time for you to step up. We need you here type thing, right? And I think in a general sense, y'all want to know why Sean and I talk so much and so openly about our faith on this program? In some sense, like, okay, fine, we're putting it out there because we're called to do so and we're trying to convince y'all towards Christianity. I get that. But in another sense, in a very practical sense, the reason why we do this is because Sean and I both believe that in leadership, one of the most important qualities is sacrifice and servitude, right? I think the idea for a lot of people that are part of this program is that a little small, seemingly insignificant sacrifice of yourself and your personhood and who you are to the betterment of somebody else can do untold things that we can't even describe, things that just carry on for generation and generation. I'm talking generational solutions here is through service to another human being, giving a part of yourself to empower not just another person, but another community. That's why we always say that
little droplets of change can turn into small ripples can turn into a wave, and eventually over time a wave can actually turn into a tidal wave of millions and hundreds of millions of conscious individuals hoping and looking out for someone else in a genuinely altruistic manner to do something better for somebody else, right? That's how I'll serve. If I ever serve, if I ever run for anything, if Sean ever runs for anything, if Zig ever does anything, if we do anything with this program right here, that will be it, always and only. I don't think I'll ever be elected because no one's going to vote for a guy that's going to get into office to destroy the institution. That'll be my campaign
I'm not
slogan,
running
right?
for anything. You can quote me on that. You know,
Sean's not running for anything.
I might run for county commission when I'm in my 60s. We'll see.
931. Hey, vote for the guy that's going to destroy the system. Here's the slogan.
There you go.
9:31 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to end it for tonight. We might see y'all tomorrow. We'll give you updates throughout the day. We love each and every one of y'all sincerely. We'll see y'all later.